Ben, I feel bad to to go from, these two guys talking about how you feel about whether something's right. What about that cold, hard data that tells you whether it's
I mean, it's a really good question, and we take the position of not having an opinion, just sharing the data, and saying this is what we see. This is not Ben Brannon's opinion, on what the state of the industry is. This is what it is, and you can do with that as you please. There's anomalies to everything, right? This is just the averages. This is a bar for you to rate yourself against. Your dollars per head, are they above, are they below? Are when you're looking at genre based on venue capacity, gross merchandise sales for a headlining artist, how are you trending? Are these indicators that can help you tweak the dials a little bit to refine whatever it is that you're doing? And so that's our goal. Is we're not a merch company, we're not the artist, we're not management, we're not the ones making the decision, but if we can provide some information that helps those folks make decisions, or lead people to a certain path. That's what we aim to do, and the debate that comes up all the time is, do more items make more money? Do I bring more stuff out on the road? And no, the answer is no. And when we released the stat that 4 items generate 75% of the revenue, you have to think about every additional item in there and the cost associated with that, not just in cost of goods, but also the space in the trailer and the time to count it in. And we all know that, the name of the game, especially on artist spend shows, is move the fans as fast as you can through there, because, it's all about the transaction time. And two, it's a shitty thing if you have a line of fans still and the club's like, out, you got to go. It's like, that's a bummer for the fan. And so the more items you have, the longer it takes them to make up their mind, and they show up and say, can I get the Ice 9 Kill shirt? Yes. Which one? The black one. God damn.
But then that
so seriously, I mean, there's case studies that we worked on where the more focused the merchandise line is, the faster the transactions are. You're helping the kids make the decisions faster, and they're rolling through. That doesn't mean you can't have diversity in that line, but and it's different at different stages of each band too. So you kind of look at where are you at, what does the data show you, and then when we released that, every merchandise company was like, thank you. We've been saying this for goddamn how many years have we been saying this, But then it becomes a conversation between management and artists of whether or not that is what works for that artist, and their vision of what that merchandise line is. So that's kind of our position in sharing some of this information with everybody.
So we all, with data, you can almost tell any story you want if you just augment it just the way you want it, or you look at this metric instead of that one. I mean, are you looking specifically at item SKUs, like this one is selling and it's doing its thing? And then sort of the second question, sort of as a follow-up on that, is how can an artist know when it's time to move on, even for an item that might still be selling? I can't imagine there was a time where Metallica stopped selling tons of those Puss Head shirts back in the 80s, but at some point they went, we just got to move on, and then brought it back later,
Yeah, and I think that is very much a case-by-case basis. While we have all this information on the unique items that are sold on an item-by-item basis, we don't share that information. That's private to the band and the merch company, and that's their data. We aggregate everything and in an anonymous way so that we can share it with folks on trends, right? What are the overarching trends here? Black tour t-shirts sell the most, so we don't get into those details, but that's where, going back to my previous comment about service, and the merch company and how they service their artists, it's looking at everything on a SKU basis for an artist to identify whether or not something is trending up or down. Is it time to put this item to bed, or do we keep rolling this thing out? And I think that for a lot of folks too, it's interesting because we started this top sellers award for small and mid cap artists, and looking back at each one of those artists compared to some of their brethren in that range, they all have some pretty consistent themes, which is, tight merchandise lines. I mean, Ice Nine Kills, like you guys have a tight merchandise line. It's not, I don't go there and see 30 Flash t-shirts sitting on the wall, and it's consistent with a lot of the bands that we saw continue to evolve through the various size venues. They have imagery that's great product. It speaks to them and their fans. It has an identity, and it's tight, So I think in terms of what the actual item is and when do we swap things out, that's up to management, artists, and the merchandise company looking at your specific trends, your specific data points, and also, is it consistent with the next album cycle? So that there's, again, like, this is the data, but it's not a rule that applies to every scenario for each band, I think is the best way to think about that.
Awesome. And I want to talk about albums and the album cycle in just a minute. I hope you guys are willing to stay for a few extra minutes because I know we're at time. Mike, real quick, one of the things that Ben was talking about there was just knowing what the fans want. And with Spencer doing the drops for Ice Nine Kills, it seems like if I were an artist that doesn't yet have that kind of a fan base, I could do drops in the forms of pre-orders just to find out whether people are actually going to like a design or not without going through the expense of actually manufacturing it. Is that something that artists at a lower level trying to get to Spencer's level, that stuff like that, what other types of like ideas should they be utilizing to discover before they go through the expensive production whether something's going to sell or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an option. The challenge that you've got to be cognizant of there is how long does it take, from the pre-order to fulfillment. As somebody else indicated, we're in the Amazon economy, and we can get away with quite a bit with Ice Nine, especially with that line, because we've got a trained fan base and we spend a lot of time on the quality of those items, so people are willing to wait. But for a smaller band, that could be challenging. One of the things that we used to do, we don't have to do it as much, was survey our fans, right? It was either through a direct survey or just a social media survey. There's always a challenge between, would I like to buy this and am I going to buy this? Those are two different things, as we all know. And as Ian, I think, stated, you lose people along the journey of, the purchase journey. We lose people. We study that stuff, with Ice Nine to try to improve it, because as we continue to, grow the number of people that are coming in, we want to be able to convert each one. And then also, Spencer, this is off of that topic, but one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I've been thinking about, Spencer's merch guy is the master of the upsell, right? When Ben's talking about throw the koozie in with the shirt, we've got a guy who knows every combination that is really getting at least 2 items into the hands of every single person. And we've had people come back and say, on social media, like, oh, thank God, that guy convinced me to get this item because, I don't know when I'm going to see Ice Nine again, or it was only limited on this tour, or whatever it may be. And we do that in the online capacity as well. But yeah, I mean, I think for developing artists, these tools exist. They're just sometimes in a little bit of a different medium, and trial and error, and as we've talked about specific to the coaching platform is, look, the experts on this panel, those are my resources to go to. When I was in a band, when Carl talks about our bands playing with each other, it's like, yeah, I would go to the dudes in other bands and ask them what works and what doesn't, and that's a way for the developing artists to connect, is within their own little community or in the online community. Hey, what's working for you? What isn't working?
Yeah. Mike, I can't believe it's an hour in and I haven't asked anybody about upselling. I'm so glad you brought that up. So is there anything strategic about the way things are priced at the merch booth that lends itself to those upsells? A $25 item next to a $15 item, for example.
Yeah, I mean, if the question's to me, absolutely. And we get to play with that. And, the nice thing is we also, have liberty and trust the merch person enough to swing and make deals and do all of the things that he needs to do. You know, Ben kind of made a comment of, I think, you know, I can't remember what the term was, but, you know, the band selling, like artists sell, I think is what he said. You know, we've watched our experience when our artist isn't selling, right? When our merch rep isn't selling, we've gone in and we've got to turn that over to somebody. That happens in certain venues or on certain tours. You know, typically our conversion goes down, our per head goes down. Part of that is we're in different environment. Other things are more expensive, the ticket itself, the parking, the beer, whatever it may be. But also it's, yeah, I mean, no offense to the dude who's selling it. He's just there to do a job, but he doesn't know, right, what things go together and how to convince, how to speak to our fan in the language that is so important.